Hola. Okay, I've got some light now. Preterite and imperfect. So we've covered ser and estar. So I hope that what we've said in that, and if you haven't watched ser and estar, please go back and watch that before we do this, otherwise it won't work. Okay? Now, preterite and imperfect. How do you distinguish between the two? How do you know? So look, we've done videos on this and we've explained it, but I'd like to put it all inside a little package so you can hear it all together, and then we'll start to practice some things. I'll give you some examples, okay? What is the preterite past? The preterite past is what's called a measurable past, okay? And this is what it is. Look, what happens with the preterite past, where it is? Oh, here it is. Okay. The preterite past is an event, okay, inside of a bubble of time, or events inside a bubble of time. But it's an event that you can measure, that you can absolutely measure, even if in the sentence that you're saying there isn't any mention of measurement, but you know you can measure it. Okay? And how you do that, how you check that, just ask yourself two questions. When you're going to say something, let me give you an example. You say, he arrived this morning. Okay? He arrived this morning. Now you say, well, can I measure that? These are the questions you're going to ask. How many times and how often? Now if you can answer one of those questions, how many times and how often, it's going to be preterite. So he arrived this morning. How many times? Well, once. People tend to arrive one time. And if you wanted to be even more detailed, you could probably pin it down to a time. Okay? That's what the preterite is. So let me give you two examples. Right. When I lived in Mexico, I ate breakfast on the patio. Okay, that's the first sentence. Second sentence. This morning, I ate breakfast on the patio. Okay. Which is which? Well, the first sentence, when I lived in Mexico, I ate breakfast on the patio. Now, is there an indication? Do you think that was once? The way I say it, do you think that was once? When I lived in Mexico, I ate breakfast on the patio once? Probably not. So that one is not something that you really could measure, because, you know, how often? Well, I don't know. Regularly. It's not something you can really pin down to a time. Whereas if I said, oh, when I lived in Mexico, I tried sugar ants once. I tried sugar ants. Okay? There's an indication that perhaps when you try something, that was once. Okay? The second sentence was, this morning I ate breakfast on the patio. Now, pretty much in that sentence there is a how often, once, this morning. So that's preterite. So when you can truly measure, when you can answer these questions, how many times, how often, I write really nicely, don't I? Okay, how many times, how often, or how often, if you like to say that. If you can answer that, or there's an indication within the sentence, preterite. I'm not going to go through the preterite structure and all of that. Look, you can go and check that online. You can look at our videos, listen to what we're doing. We do one on the preterite. I just want you to understand how you know when to use the preterite. So it's inside a bubble of time, okay? Now let me just have a rant. I want to rant for a moment. The amount of times that I have students and I say, what is the preterite? How do you know it's the preterite? And they go, aha, it's a finished event, or it's a completed past. Now, come on, let's be honest. Isn't all past completed? That seems to be the thing for me. So that is, and that happens in so many books. I see this is completed past. What a load of rubbish! All past is completed. And so that helps you absolutely not one jot. In fact, it causes more confusion, because people go, is this a completed past? Yeah, it must be preterite. I used to live in Mexico. Is that over? It's completed, yeah. That's not preterite. Okay, so there's my rant over. So please, if you've got in your mind a rule which is preterite is completed past, please take it out, wipe your bottom with it, and throw it away. Okay, alright. Can you measure it? Can you put that inside a bubble of time? It's the preterite. Okay? Now, imperfect. The imperfect, which is the aber here, and just to help you remember the endings, one of my students, I think I mentioned this before, said aber used to sing Mamma Mia. Okay, so aber at the front and ia at the end helps you to remember your endings, if you remember that. Or aber was singing Mamma Mia. Okay, so unlike the preterite, which is inside a bubble of time, very defined, you can measure the diameter, the circumference, you can put a full measurement on it. The imperfect is absolutely not measurable. As soon as it becomes measurable, it stops being the imperfect, because the imperfect is this. Okay? It's just a flow of something that was going on that you can't measure, that you really can't measure. Okay? So, how do you identify it? Well, first of all, if you can't answer the questions, how many times and for how long, if you can't answer that, it's probably going to be preterite. But there are even easier tips for the preterite, because you're going to hear in sentences these. Okay? You're going to hear was and then the verb with ing. Alright? So he was walking down the street. Preterite. We were talking. Sorry, not preterite, imperfect, dear me. Don't have that logged in. Okay, so he was walking down the street, can't measure it, that's the imperfect. Okay, we were talking, that's the imperfect, were-ing. And then, of course, if you hear used to, that's going to be imperfect too. Okay, so this morning I was making breakfast. And whilst I was making breakfast, I was listening to some music on the computer, and I was talking to Cynthia about what we'd done the previous day, and we were having a good laugh, and it was a nice atmosphere. Okay, all of that is preterite. You see, was-ing, we were-ing, were-ing. Okay, now. Just let me help you to give you some reasons. Why do we need the preterite and why do we need the imperfect? If you talk in preterite all the time, this morning I got up, I went downstairs, I had breakfast, then I had a shower, and I had a shave, and then I got dressed and I combed my hair. Then I left the house at about 8 o'clock and I drove to work. When I got to work, I started work and I worked until 12. That's boring. Who tells stories like that? If you tell stories like that, stop it, because it's very boring. Okay? We don't tell stories like that. And that's what the imperfect's about. Okay? The imperfect's all about filling in the background, giving people a little bit of info before you give them the action. Okay? The preterite is all the action. Boom, 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 boom. Okay? The imperfect is all the background. It's what was going on. So, we do this all the time. We set a scene with the imperfect. You go, oh, you never guess what? I was driving the other day, okay? And I was waiting at a set of traffic lights when a car bumped into me. Alright? So, I was driving the other day. Imperfect. Was-ing. And I was waiting at a set of traffic lights. Imperfect. Was-ing. Just setting the background. No, you can't measure it. It's just setting up for the punchline, which is the preterite. And then a car crashed into me. How many times? One time. That's the preterite. Okay, do you see how that happens? Now, we use that naturally in our own language. We naturally tell a story like that. But in Spanish, when you're learning Spanish, you've got to do it kind of consciously. Okay? So you've got to say, well, how am I going to set up this story? And then, what is the action? Bring in the preterite. Other things. The preterite is sequential. It's sequential. So you see, you can't, the story. This morning, okay, I'll do it in Spanish, see if you can work out what happened. Okay. Esta mañana, yo bajé las escaleras, me caí, y luego salí de casa. Okay? I'll do that again. So esta mañana yo bajé las escaleras, me caí y luego salí de casa. Alright, so what I said this morning, this morning I went down the stairs, I fell, and then I left the house. Okay, the question is, where did I fall? Where did I fall? Now, the temptation might be to say I fell on the stairs, but no. You see, the preterite is sequential. What I mean by that is, it doesn't overlap. There's no overlap with the preterite. Okay, this event happens and it finishes, bubble of time. Then this event happens and that finishes. So, my story, esta mañana bajé las escaleras, and that's finished. I've done. I'm at the bottom now. Me caí, I fell, after I'd gone down the stairs. Okay? And then I left home. So you can't overlap. You can only say this, and this, and this. And now it makes for a very, very strange kind of story if you just use the preterite. But with the imperfect, yes, you can. You can start layering things with the word mientras. And you say, esta mañana, mientras bajaba las escaleras, me caí. So this morning, whilst I was going down the stairs, imperfect, I fell. Preterite action. Yeah? Does that make sense? So you can't overlap with the preterite. You can only overlap with the imperfect. Now, the imperfect's easy to make. Aber, ihr. And I remember that when I learned that, I thought, oh, brilliant! I can use that as a past tense all the time. If you only talk in the imperfect, people will be sitting there going, is there any action to this at all? Did anything happen? Or you're just sort of filling me in on the background. And it becomes very strange if you try and tell an action event using the imperfect. You can't do it. But what you can do is you can use it to set up lots and lots of things before you tell the action. Yeah. This morning I was reading a book and I was listening to the radio. The television was playing saying something strange, and I was feeling hungry. And then Cynthia came in with a big breakfast. Yeah? So you can set it up, imperfect, 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 overlapping, all happening at the same time. Bang! Action. Okay? Does that make sense? So, that's the imperfect and the preterite. How do you measure them? Just in resuming. Okay? Preterite is inside a bubble of time. How many times? How often? If you answer that, it's preterite. If you can measure it, it's preterite. If you can't measure it, it's going to be imperfect. And you can watch out for the was-in, the were-in, and the used-to. ¿Ok? Vale. Nos vemos en el próximo y vamos a hablar un poco de los was-is. We're going to talk about the was-is in the next one, so come and join me. Hasta luego.